Oh, Mr. Jeffries is here.
What's going on, sir?
Hey, Demetrius.
Dude, Mr. Hershey, thank you both for joining me. I gotta just come clean real fast because Dan wrote the whole introduction of this LLM introduction report, and I did not give him credit at all, and I just am realizing that. And so, I'm so sorry.
It was a gift. It was intended to be ghost written, but I appreciate the props.
Oh, so you guys talk for a little bit. I gotta go introduce Diego on stage too, but I know you guys love chatting, so I'll be right back.
Well,
that sounds great. How's it going, dude?
How are you doing? So we're just Fireside chatting live here. I guess that's the way to do it.
Entertaining the people.
Entertaining the people. I mean, should we be talking about LLMs, or we should talking about
probably? What's what's the top
end of the world? AGI.
That works too. I guess that's an easy way to do it. It was one of the things that I had on my list for Demetrius to talk about. But I'm curious, what's the top of your mind these days? Like, there's so many routes you can go down with LLMs. Like, what are the most exciting, or like, what's the top of your mind? I mean, like frontier of language models right now for you.
I mean, the thing that I've been thinking about most is like, what are the applications? And I think a lot of these, frameworks are going to be, they're going to be commodities. And I also think that they're going to be fierce price competition amongst folks, in that everybody's building a tool, but I really want the application, I saw this recently where it's like, someone said, oh, here's how you take a story from the internet and dump it on the TikTok, and here's how you do it with LangChain or whatever. I'm like, cool, I want to press a button and do that. I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to program that myself, right? Like, who's doing that?
Yeah.
So, how are you feeling about that side of the house? Like, what's the movement with that?
I agree, and I think like you've seen so much energy around like the our application is everything. Like, so many people, part of the challenge I think that people face right now with language models is there's so many possible ways you can look in terms of how to make things happen, to apply things. And it's easy to get distracted and try to solve the whole world's problems. And so you see like a lot of popular frameworks out there that are like general, try to solve everything at once. And I agree. Like, I think that what I get the most excited about is when someone like figures out a thing that they can solve really, really well and goes after that. And
that's the Unix model, right? I mean, like, I think people need to lean into that, the old Unix philosophy of do one thing and one thing well, right? If you think about the old Microsoft model of, we made a binary and it does 8 billion things, right? And then the Unix model is like, this is grep. It like, it goes through text and and picks out a piece, right? And I think people need to lean into that. I think there's a lot of software that's going to be in between giant enterprise software and consumer models, and you don't need to go build the next entire HR app to replace it. In fact, I'm not even sure you need to replace it at all. I think it's perfectly reasonable to build these smaller applications and workflows that we've never been able to build before. And why aren't people leaning into that?
I agree. I think like there's been some of the smart people that I've worked with have been on like a debate of some sort of, does the operating system exist yet? I think is the challenge. Like, some people think that LLMs out by themselves like can't exist as sort of the operating system upon which we can build those apps. I think there's the question of like, do we need something else still? Demetrius is here now to steer us towards not going far off the rails. We were getting deep.
Dude, we started in right away, man. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to derail you, but I do want to say that you two both met up with Diego in the green room, and I got all kinds of funny texts from him, and so I had to go smooth things over because
we told you, punt that dude to the next stage, man. I mean, he's tier 2. We love you, Diego. You're awesome, man. We're just messing with you.
So I had to go intro him real fast because I need to. I enjoy my relationship that I have with Diego, and I want to keep it friendly. But if he meets you two in the backstage area one more time, I may not be calling him a friend for much longer.
We got him all riled up, man. We turned him against you in 5 minutes, man. That's how we did
it. Exactly. So anyway, where were we? What were you guys talking about? Don't let me interrupt.
And we were talking about applications. What are the kinds of applications that are going to be developed with this stuff, and then And Dave was raising the question of whether, the operating system is there for these models. I think the answer to that clearly is no, right? In other words, I don't know if it's an operating system. I think that's a good analogy, but I tend to think of it as like, I tend to think of it as LAMP stack, WordPress, Divi, right? These kind of higher layers of abstraction, or like assembler, Python, you go up the stack, C++, Python, right? And I think people are trying to make the LLMs do too much, and you've got this kind of whole batshit crazy continuum. It's like AGI is tomorrow, man, and like it's not. By the way, it's
Twitter.
definitely not. Sorry,
Twitter.
And like it's also not killing us all. You're all like gonna forget about it in 5 years and be saying something else is gonna kill us all. So that's the progression of technology, right? But in this case, I feel like we have to lean into what these things do already, right? There's going to be middleware around it. There's going to be things that like, I'm seeing a ton of research papers now on how to make the LLMs think better, right? Expose their world model, expose their belief systems. It's weird to think that they have belief systems, but they do. We like to think we're these special creatures, but that's a delusion, right? And there's a whole bunch of this other stuff where they're working through like how you ask it the correct questions, right? So I think there's going to be a ton of this kind of work that makes the model smarter, makes them hallucinate less, attaches them to other things, and there's going to be best practices that emerge. I don't think we understand how to do that yet, and I know you've looked at that a lot, and probably agree with that. Although maybe you disagree. I don't know.
Are you talking to me?
No, man. I don't know. Who cares what you think?
This one.
No.
I'm completely aligned.
See?
Yeah, I think. I've talked a lot. Like, there's just this new capability that's dropped in our lap, and it's tempting to solve to do everything. But like fundamentally, we have software that can kind of think and reason and has an intuition about how the world works. That's the new baseline. That's like a new unbelievable tool that unlocks things to do, and it's tempting to go solve every problem in the world with that and build AGI. And that was my first instinct when I put my hands on GPT-3.2 is like, okay, I'm going to break down tasks and solve everything, see what happens. But you don't solve anything that way. So I completely agree that just like diligently chipping off problems one at a time is like the most exciting thing to do right now.
Or decompose the logic, right? So we did this at the Infrastructure Alliance, right? We built a newsletter writer that does like 95% of the work, but we did the thinking for it. It wasn't like, please come up with the newsletter writer for me. We thought, well, at first, make the thing go out there and grab the stories. Well, what is it? How does it know what's interesting? It doesn't make any sense. We're always trading stories, and so we're grabbing the latest archive papers, whatever. We started dumping into a Telegram channel. The bot pulls it out of there. Then the bots that we kind of gave them little personalities, they'll pick their 6 favorite stories and they'll have a tournament. And then after that, there's another one, which again, we gave it a whole series of kind of like prompt engineering on the background to say, look, be dynamic, be colloquial, be a blog style. Don't be overly formal, but don't write like you're 12 years old, right? And give me a summary, but give me 3 different summaries, right, of each different story, so that I, as the writer, can look at this and go, okay, this is terrible, this is great, move this line here. Oh, look, it used the archive summary again, right? No matter how many times we try to rip that out of it, that's fine, right? That's working with the machine. And I think a lot of people are not doing that. They're building on these things. We're like, bam, like go figure out everything, and then tell me how to do it. I think that's a losing strategy, and I think we need to lean in what we can do now.
Yeah, and then it gets stuck in those recursive loops, and you can't like prompt it out of them. That's the other problem. Is like, hey, you try and nudge it the other way, and it just goes back to where it got stuck. And so I made the joke, which I think I told both of you on Twitter, and nobody laughed. I guess I'm just not that kind of Twitter influencer, but it was like, yeah, I tried to get AutoGPT to make me a birthday cake, and next thing you know, somebody from TaskRabbit shows up at my door with a used version of the DVD Space Jam, and it's like, how did that happen? It went way off the rails, man. It went way off, and then it's like super hard to decide what you can and can't have it do. And so I know there's a lot of work that's being done in that. And I think at the end of the day, what you're saying, Dan, is just like, chunk it out, make smaller chunks, make it like expect less of your LLM, and you're going to have better results.
That's right. Yeah, I think it goes back to the old Google philosophy of letting computers do what they do well and humans do what they do well. Right now, what computers do well has changed a bit, but we've generally forgotten to go with that strategy. And I think it's tempting because it's just so fascinating when you first start playing with these things, and you imagine that we're already there. It's like it's her level, right? And it's going to be 2 years before it's going off into the ether, right? Because it's so super powerful. Right? It's not. Wake up and work within the like stop seeing what's like an illusion behind your eyes. Open your eyes, see what's here in actual reality, and work with where it actually is. It's still pretty amazing. That's the thing I try to get through to people is that where it's at is amazing if you put these sci-fi fantasies out of your head and you start actually seeing what's in front of you and you start understanding like the limitations of it and working within those limitations. There's a lot to do with these things, and that I think is quite amazing. We did this at the IA the other day where we had to go research 1,000 companies to reach out to folks, and it went out and read a bunch of web pages that saved us days worth of work. That's great, right? It summarized it for us.
Yeah, I even think like you can still be very ambitious. It's just like there's such a big gap between the whole world of problems, like the whole universe of problem solving, and like ambitious visions of constrained problems. And so even pulling back from I'm going to solve every task, anything we want to do anywhere, like solve all of the problems with one single machine and system. I think there's incredible the paper Voyager that came out a couple weeks ago that was using like GPT-4 as a knowledge engine to play Minecraft, right? Mm-hmm. We fundamentally think what's going on behind the scenes there of like being able to solve that's like complicated game, things like that. But I think it's a really crystal clear like thing. We could never have built an agent that was like we used reinforcement learning for a long time and you could never get close, right? But it's incredibly ambitious to think of like solving pretty large general games is a useful framework, but like that's a general task. Like how do you play a complicated thing? So you can get really, really ambitious. Like I think we can solve really ambitious, hard things, and even if they take a lot of work and they aren't a quick demo on Twitter and easy, it's just like still constrained. It's not the whole universe of things. It's like you put it into the sort of puzzle of a specific set of problems that you want to solve, and there's a lot you can do. But again, it all revolves around software can reason now. Like we have to think and like have and a bit of the world model that you mentioned. Like there's some software can have a model of the world now that it never had before, and those are just such powerful power paradigms. And it just is like again focus on solving something concrete, valuable, useful for people, and you can do incredible stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the other thing I'm sort of seeing though now is when you think, I think that's awesome when you're saying go solve ambitious problems too, right? In other words, but let the problem guide you, right? See what is actually there rather than your sort of belief systems about where it's going. And when you run up against the limitations, think about what those limitations are and whether they're solvable and how you would go about solving them. That's the creativity right now. It's not even really data science anymore at some level. It's applied AI, it's programming, it's thinking, right? And it's utilizing techniques we've used in the past. The other thing that's sort of weird to me at this point in time is every time I think, man, this thing is moving at light speed. How do I slow it down? I start looking around and like the infrastructure is barely there. Like it feels like the beginning of the internet. So like immediately the other day I was like, Falcon 40B, let's test that out. We've been using GPT-4, like someone spun this up, right, to run it. It's like, oh, there's an announcement from AWS. So I go, cool, into my AWS account. There's 5 models available and there's a wait list, right? Or, I can go spin it up in RunPod or DataCrunch with 2 A100s at $14 an hour, and $150,000 a year. I'm like, nobody has taken a bunch of open source models and said, here's the top 10 on Hugging Face, and I want to parallelize requests to them, and I want to even, sell those on a token basis. and nobody's done that basic level thing yet, right? So there's this light speed in terms of research and thinking and all this kind of stuff, and then this delusional aspect of it that's like, bam, like it's going to take over the world, kill everyone, destroy all the jobs, whatever. This total like status game nonsense, right? Where people are just upping the ante of like, no,
and the
it'll
one
kill
that I
10
always
million.
kick out of is like I'm becoming a 10x engineer. And I don't know, I consider myself like a relatively smart person, like not the best. I know a lot of people way smarter than me, but like my brain can't work 10 times faster. Like I don't care what software is happening. I cannot process 10 times more thoughts. I am not that smart. And like maybe I'm just like the dumb one, but I'm just like amazed at the concept that people like if you're automating a whole bunch of things, like go for it. But like I don't want to do 10 times more either. Like I get stressed by like 50% more. Like if I have 15% more things I'm trying to think about and accomplish, like I get very stressed. So people talking about 10xing themselves and things like that, and it's like my brain doesn't work that way. So I'm with you. Like I think
or
what
the
I think there's like
VCs.
we're human limited to some extent, right? Like progress is human limited. Like every time there's hands on keyboards or you have to go talk to a person to figure out a problem, like that is so much that is slow. It's a gate. So it's funny because I see that lag between like ideas and implementation that exists so clearly, and it's not gonna. We can't just magically fix it unless you believe in AGI. But that's the whole point, right? So it's just going to take so much time to figure out the infrastructure, to figure out the tools, to figure out the APIs, to figure out how to build with this stuff in the first place. And we're just like scratching the surface of it. So I think some people believe like we're in this crazy takeoff, but we're just figuring out the basics of like what should our idea of what the API should look like for a language model is based on the first people who released the first API, and then we're all just sort of like going with that from OpenAI, right? We have no idea. We have no idea.
That's so true. Dude, also, I mean, the other thing on the 10x engineer note is like people talking about how, and especially your friends in VC land, David, it's like, oh, well, are companies even going to need more than 10 people now? And it's like, yeah, there's still a lot of things that people are going to have to be doing. And I'm pretty sure AI is not going to make it so the people are going to be redundant. And like you said, the 10x engineer, that's great in theory. The 10x anything is great in theory, but us even knowing what we're going to have AI replace in our workflows, and that's a whole beast in itself. And there is another thing that I wanted to touch on for you, David. One time we talked, you mentioned how this is making it so we don't need data scientists to learn how to be like good coders anymore. Now, when you told me that, that was probably like 3 or 4 months ago, and maybe your thinking has changed since then. But I'd love to hear like go into that because up until now, there has been a lot of talk, especially in the community, about are or is it worth my time as a data scientist to go and learn how Kubernetes works? And go and figure out like these software engineering fundamentals. And I still think it is, but you were like, dude, I don't think it's going to happen anymore. Have things changed in your mind?
Let me like separate out two things because I think it's an interesting point. One is it's really hard to be a software engineer. Like being a software engineer is a hard thing that takes a long time to learn. And it's not just like learning how to code or writing code. It's like the fundamentals of operating production systems is really, really hard. And we have like whole roles dedicated to figuring that out. And so again, maybe I'm the slow one, but like it's very hard to be a great data scientist and a great ML scientist and understand experiments and how to manage them and how to think probabilistically and to be a great DevOps person. Like those people exist, but it's just like not very easy. I think there's a couple things that are nice. Like we have these assistant programs that I actually do think are going to be helpful in like helping people who are less experienced programmers or DevOps people like begin to explore the interfaces. So like I can go ask ChatGPT how to do something in Kubernetes, and it's better than the resources that I have searching the internet. A lot of times, if it's like I'm being poignant, that's neat. It offers an on ramp for some folks. But the fundamentals of learning how to and think about production systems, you still have to learn that. So I don't necessarily think that problem is going away. Where there are different skill sets in this world, and it's important to have software engineers who understand production systems. It's important to have data scientists that understand how to work probabilistically and understand machine learning systems and data and the funny things that come with it. Those are both like very valid specialties in my mind that we can augment both of them both directions, I think, with language models, but I don't know if it's a solution to everything.
But it's interesting that you say that, right? Because I've been big on this kind of centaur kick, and I think I've seen a lot of people out there going like, "Bam, software is coding is irrelevant," and people are like, "Should I even learn this anymore? I'm just getting out of school. It's all irrelevant." No, it is not. It's not. And when I see people developing a program that says like, "Oh, we're going to fire all the engineers or whatever," I'm like, "Cool, you're going to be hiring them all back because you're idiots." And the problem is, the software has got to adapt to the different level of coders. In other words, what I expect to see as the final piece of software is the advanced coder. It's going to help do the really boring boilerplate stuff. It's going to augment the thinking that an advanced coder does. An advanced coder is able to think through abstracting like novel problems in a very unique way. That's a very advanced skill that comes from a long time. I think the junior coders are going to see things that are more like an in-game video game tutorial. Remember in the old video games, you had to break out the manual and read it ahead of time, and you had no idea what you were doing. But now the first level is always like, how do I do this? And here's how I orient myself to the game. And you're
and you've even got the overlay. You got the little cool thing that points you the right direction and everything.
That's correct. I think the same thing's going to happen with junior developers to make them better over the course of time. It's going to be like having a personalized tutor in there. And there's this mistake that like it's able to do all these things. Like, we're going to, the AI is going to pump out the program. It's going to put it into production. Okay. Well, what happens when it's not scaling? What happens when it gets hacked? What happens when it gets hacked with a novel hack that doesn't exist, from an advanced persistent threat? Who's writing that code? Right. And I think there's a challenge in people thinking about these kinds of things. And I can give you a perfect example of some people are like, "Damn, every writer is out of work." Okay, listen, when Maria, speaks like 8 languages at the Infrastructure Alliance, she was writing a blog, and she had, English isn't her first language, but so she was having ChatGPT help her. And in the first version I got, I was like, like my writer instinct immediately was like, boom, like running through its heuristics. It's like, no, every paragraph is the same size, so that makes the eye tired, boring. Like it's the language is too formal. It doesn't use enough contractions. It uses way too many be-verb constructions. So I wrote her a whole prompt to say, go do these things, use less be-verb constructions, use contractions, vary the paragraph size, whatever. The next version came back and it was much stronger, but it still didn't quite stick the landing, on like the final point that it was making. I'm like, now I can't even tell you why that is, except I just know after 20, 25 years of writing that it's wrong. So I rewrote the point, to really stick the landing and make the point. So I think this collaborative thing is where people need to get to. And I think if you're out there marketing your software as, bam, we're going to replace everyone, guess what? No one is going to buy your software. No one. You are going to face fierce resistance from everyone, deservedly so. Don't go in there selling it like that. Don't write it on Twitter. Don't think that it's clever. It's not clever. Build things that are collaborative.
Yeah, even what else? Like, I'm more bullish that we can replace a lot of workflows maybe than that. Like, I think there's like a lot of room to replace people's work, and not that they won't have work to do and other things to complement. But like, I do think there's room to, like, there's some software tasks I think we can like fully automate potentially. But the route from today to fully automating software tasks is not, I just released this thing and told you about it on Twitter that replaces your software tasks. It's considering the pathway from today where we have developers that need guidance, help, things like that are thinking about problems, where we have organizations that employ tens of thousands of software engineers, like managers that are incredibly entrenched to keep that the case, right? Like, there's so much momentum fighting against you if you are trying to like just replace people, that you need to take people on this journey from where I am right now, where I'm writing all my code, to some parts are being automated, to I'm being assisted, to I'm comfortable delegating this task to language models, to I'm comfortable having language models be a part of my team. Like, that is going to be a journey. And if you've never worked with a big company and the momentum that has to, like, that those companies have, like, you cannot flip a switch and change the world for them. It's a journey. And I think I'm totally with you.
I want to say one thing on this that Dan, you mentioned before, and it's like these it's edge cases, right? And I saw something, who knows if it is real news or fake news, but when you ask ChatGPT to code you up something, or Copilot to code you up something, and it hallucinates a package that you need to download for that to actually work, what happens when people figure out, oh, it hallucinates these packages, I'm going to get some malware and go and put that up, so there actually is that package now, and then you just unsuspectingly go and download this, right? So there's all, that's just like a side note. It's a little bit off topic from what you all are saying, but I thought that was hilarious when I saw it, because yeah.
I'd be less worried about that, actually. But in other words, like, there's plenty of ways that malware. First of all, AI will write some malware, but AI will also be in the defense of malware, right? In other words, hardening systems and changing systems and catching in real time. But I do think what you mentioned actually is semi-relevant to what we were saying there, in that, how do you, if you go and fire all of your like 20-year-old, 20-year programmers, and take the people who've been doing it for 4 years and think that ChatGPT is going to equal that 20-year experience, how does that programmer know that it hallucinated that package? Or how does it, I've talked to a lot of programmers where they're like, man, it makes mistakes in a different way than a human makes, right? And you have to look for different kinds of things. It's no longer like I missed a semicolon or a bracket here. But it, like, it changed the variable name, or it hallucinated a package, or it made an API call that looked really realistic, but it's not right. So you still have to have a level of knowledge in terms of this understanding. I think you're right, David, that it will replace some workflows, and that's fine. In other words, for me, if I think about something like Divi, it makes me look like a fantastic designer, even though I'm a terrible designer. Like, I'm pretty good at Photoshop. I have a decent design sense, and it's enough for me to hack together a web page. I still work with advanced designers, right? On when I need like really good understanding of kerning and fonts or whatever, when we're doing something. So, but it does allow me to do that thing. In other words, build a pretty good website, if not like Amazon's website. That's valuable. In other words, especially for small businesses, when you have like fewer hands, right? And you need to be able to, like, you need to be able to do more tasks with less. I think that's valuable, right? That's kind of that WhatsApp effect of being able to get from 50 engineers to, hundreds of millions of users. I do think that that's possible with where we are right now and where we're going over the next couple of years. So I'll agree with you on that point, actually.
Dude, so there are some incredible things coming through in the chat, and I want to thank everybody who has been talking in the chat real fast, and they're nodding their heads along with us. I love seeing that. I've got like one more minute, I think, before we bring on Aravind, our next speaker, but there is something that I want to touch on in these last, like, whatever, couple minutes. We don't need to totally keep time super, super, super tight, although I've been calling myself Ringo all day. The idea of monitoring is something that people just keep bringing up, and how it's different than traditional ML monitoring and MLOps, like how you're looking at, or just like DevOps monitoring. And so now with prompting, you're looking at monitoring, and you're looking at all kinds of different things. So David, I'll kick this one over to you, because I know you brought it up and you mentioned that you wanted to chat about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's this funny thing that everybody is working on observability, they say, with language models. And it's actually, I don't think, what people are actually doing. I think what people are doing is trying to figure out if their thing works, which is a completely different paradigm. Like, observability traditionally is, okay, my thing works, and does it keep working over time? Like, is the server crashing? Is something going on? Is there, like, trace that? This is people are shipping things to production language models and just don't know if they work, period. And I think that's an interesting paradigm. And it's like the fundamental problem is actually, like, does my thing work? So it's a completely different set of tools and solutions I think we need than, like, the history of, like, monitoring and testing. It's closer to like APM, like amplitude or mixed panel or something like that. Like, are users liking my thing, what's going on? But there's this underlying core thing of, does my system work? You've had great talks in this conference about the challenges of evaluation. And I think we're just still really early in this day or in trying to figure out what the right way to know if your language model application works is. Is it to just like put it in front of users and pray? Is there some way you can do it up front? God's people building gold tests and things like that. But yeah, I find funny that like the word observability kind of kills me in this because I think it's a little
Misleading.
misused, as it were, because I don't think it's the exact thing that people are going for in this case. Yeah.
I mean, look, I think we're going to need a whole kind of different monitoring, right? Like, it's not like, F1 score and like drift, right? It's like, does this logic make any sense, or is it batshit crazy, right? Like, I asked it to go find a present for my sister, and it's off buying, diapers on, Amazon. Like, that's incorrect. Like, how do I detect that? I'm not sure we have the answers even to this kind of stuff yet. And it's going to take a whole new kind of thinking. I hope people are out there working at it, though. I hope people are really thinking about the kinds of, how do you detect logic errors? How do you detect better prompt injections with signatures and heuristics and other neural networks, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I hope that people are out there figuring out like an actual hallucination, meaning like, okay, I'm able to check this against Wolfram Alpha, and that math output might be wrong, and what's the probability of that? These kinds of things, I think there's going to be a ton of work in the coming years, and that's a very lucrative field for anybody looking to get into it if they can solve those problems.
Yeah, I think, and there's like a number of dimensions of it, and it gets like different forms of complexity. Like the funny thing is, we're evaluating on just like a completely different set of dimensions than we really have before. It used to be a lot easier, but now it's like you kind of want to know: is my thing toxic? Is my thing nice? Is my thing helpful? Is my thing good, smart, accurate? Like there's a lot of different ways to think about it. A lot of the tools to date have been sort of generic. People like thumbs ups or thumbs down, or benchmarks and things like that. But yeah, great work going on. Like, I have a ton of people that are actually like fiercely debating the right approach forward, whether like we can trust GPT-4 to evaluate things for us, or if we need specialized tools, or if it's only people. I think it's like one of the most fun fields. I talk to researchers a lot trying to dive into this. I think it's like the most interesting space to think about.
Well, does this warrant a whole new tool, or is this something that you can put into New Relic?
I think there's multiple versions of that answer. So does the ability to test language models warrant a new tool? Heck yeah. Like fundamentally way different than anything we've ever done before. Is like this unstructured thing and knowing if it's like friendly or not. It's just like a completely different question. And I think that's so fundamentally different that like it is certainly a new tool. Does the like, do people like my thing? Is that super different from amplitude? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. But the testing stuff Daniel's talking about of just like, how do I know this thing works and how do I test it on these dimensions? I think that's like a really new paradigm. There's a lot of space to like, I think that's a completely new tool. It's like the unit test. It's writing unit tests, right? Like it's fundamentally not that different from writing a unit test in the past, but a different paradigm of it.
Dude, well, funny you say that. I'm just going to let everyone know that in like almost 30 minutes, 40 minutes, we're going to have Maxime come on here, and he's the creator of Apache Airflow, but he also, his newest thing that he's been messing around with has been Promptimized. And I just spoke to him on a podcast, and his whole thing is like, you have unit tests, but for him, he's like, I want to create prompt tests. And so you can have your prompting use cases and have 100 or 200 of those that you can throw at the models that you're using and see how it works out. It's not exactly on the back end or on the user facing side, like do users like this, but at least it's a step in the right direction as far as how you interact with the model and how you can tell if this model is actually useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, and I applaud all of the folks like that making like small steps forward. I've seen a bunch. I think there's a lot to figure out and to test. And to what we were saying earlier, like it will just take a lot of time for people to figure out how to develop this stuff. Like we are limited by our humans on how we like to develop, to figure out what's the best way to write a test and to evaluate this stuff. And so I think it just takes a ton of work.
Yep. All right, fellas. I think I got to kick you off now. This has been awesome. And Dan, a huge shout out, because it's Friday night and he missed salsa class for this. Salsa class.
That is correct. But it was worth it.
Exactly. So there's all kinds of awesome stuff going on in the chat, and I think you guys, if you get a minute, go jump over there and say hi to people. The discussion was awesome. I knew it was going to be cool with you two. It is always a very chill conversation, and when I talk to you separately, I never walk away without just having my mind blown, and so getting to talk to you both is an absolute honor. Now you're out of here.
Good to see you.
Bye.
See you guys.